How would you stop you? If you were trying to stop you, what would you do? Welcome to the Leader Fitness Podcast, where leaders come to train. The Leader Fitness Podcast is brought to you by LeadCom Gym. LeadCom Gym helps leaders and teams get healthy, improve performance, and maximize impact. I'm your host, David Brown-Dawson, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into my favorite book from 2024, and one that has me asking this question: how would you stop you? How would I stop me? This book is written by an author you may be familiar with. I imagine you've heard the person's name, but it's not the first book that comes to mind when you think of this author. The author is Napoleon Hill. Yes, the author of Think and Grow Rich, but that is not the book that we're talking about on this episode. The book we're talking about is called Outwitting the Devil. Outwitting the Devil was written by Napoleon Hill soon after he wrote Think and Grow Rich. However, the manuscript was locked away and hidden by Napoleon Hill's family for 70 years. So why this book? Curiosity. I hadn't heard of this book before this year. It doesn't seem to have gotten as much publicity as Think and Grow Rich, at least not in the spaces that I've been in. And the fact that it was hidden by Hill's family for more than 70 years is wild. This book was written around 1938. It wasn't published until 2011. All right, second, so curiosity, fascination. The way this book is written is fascinating. Napoleon Hill writes this book as a conversation between him and the devil. The third reason is, God, it's so good. He writes it as a conversation. It's fascinating. The third reason is this book really gets after this idea. If you wanted to stop you from using your gifts for the good of others and the glory of God, what would you do? This book lays out a blueprint. This book is about self-awareness, knowing yourself and what you may be susceptible to, and being aware of the tools, tactics, and tricks of your enemy. And that's what this episode is about. And here's the thing. As leaders, we have to lead ourselves well first. And that means knowing ourselves fully so that we can make conscious decisions. It also means being aware of what may be plaguing us or plaguing our team members to be able to help them guard against those things as well. All right, so I have my notes here because I don't want to miss some things, and I basically have it set up so that there's a few key points, but then there's page numbers of parts of the book that I either want to share directly or share a little piece and then talk to. All right, so as I said, Outwitting the Devil was written by Napoleon Hill around 1938 and was annotated by Sharon Lechter and then published in 2011. Sharon Lechter is an accountant, an author, and a businesswoman who co-wrote a number of books, including 3 Feet from Gold, which is another one of my 2024 favorite books. Now, this doesn't mean that these books were released in this year. It just means that this is the year that I came across them. I wonder if I could do a part 2 or another episode with Sharon Lechter one day. I'll call my shot and see how God moves. All right, so I've underlined many places in this book. Goodness, if you saw all the underlines that I have in this book, you'd be like, what in the world is happening? Not a problem. We're not gonna go through every single one, but I do wanna set the scene. First with, I think it's important to start with the letter written by, the note to readers by Sharon Lechter, because it really does set the scene in a very fascinating way. So bear with me. I'm going to read it's call it 3.5 pages, but I just want to take some time to set the scene of this book by the woman who annotated in this book. And what that means is basically she went through the manuscript, kept it's not, and she'll say this in there, she kept the manuscript pretty much the same, but she added her own thoughts in a different font type. She basically, just so that you know, okay, this is Sharon Lechter, okay, this is Napoleon's writing, and she makes that clear. So I just want to start with this because I think it's really powerful. Note to readers by Sharon Lechter. Outwitting the Devil is the most profound book I have ever read. First, I was incredibly honored when Don Green, CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, trusted me enough to ask me to become involved in this project. And then I read the manuscript. I couldn't sleep for a week. This already gets me jacked up. Written on a manual typewriter in 1938 by the master himself, Napoleon Hill, this manuscript had been locked away and hidden by Hill's family for 72 years. Why? Because they were frightened by the response it would invoke. Hill's courage in revealing the devil's work around each of us every day in our churches, our schools, and our politics threatened the very core of society as it was known at the time. When asked why the family had hidden the manuscript, Don Green recites the following inside story. So Don Green is the CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. It was the objections of Hill's wife, Annie Lou. She was secretary to Dr. William Plummer Jacobs, president of Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina. Carolina. Jacobs was also owner of Jacobs Press and a public counselor to a group of South Carolina textile firms. Jacobs hired Hill to come to Clinton to work for him, and Annie Lou did not want the book published because of the role of the devil. She feared the response from organized religion and maybe for Hill's job. Even though Hill died in 1970, Annie Lou did not die until 1984. Upon Annie Lou's death, the manuscript came into the possession of Dr. Charlie Johnson, then the president of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Charlie was the nephew of Annie Lou Hill. Charlie's wife, Frankie, knew and shared Annie Lou's feelings. Frankie told Charlie that she did not want the article published while she was alive either. Charlie's wife passed away a couple years ago, and Charlie finally gave me the manuscript, bound in red leather and embossed with the letters "Outwitting the Devil" in gold on the cover. The foundation believes the manuscript has a powerful message that needs to be shared. That's Don Green. So now here's Sharon speaking again. After speaking with Don, I was overcome with a powerful realization. This book, even though written in 1938, was actually meant to be published today, meant to rock our society today. It was intended to provide answers during this uncertain economic and spiritual time. It provides the keys for each of us to outwit the devil in our own lives. It shows us how to chart a course for success and to add value to the world around us through the process. It provides the keys for each of us to outwit the devil in our own lives. It shows us how to chart a course for success and to add value to the world around us through the process. That's from Sharon Lecter. So she goes on to say, just as Think and Grow Rich helped us recover and succeed after the Great Depression, Outwitting the Devil was written to help each of us recover and succeed today. So when she's writing this is 2010, 2011 is when this book is fully published. So this is when we're coming out of the Great Recession. So that's the context. You may ask if Hill believed his conversation with the devil was real or was it merely imaginary? The choice is yours. But I also asked Don Green about Hill's thoughts in his other writings to see if we could get another look inside Hill's head. Don's response was as follows. The use of imaginary conversations was not new to Hill. In 1953, Hill published How to Raise Your Own Salary, which was written as a conversation between Hill and Carnegie. Hill actually interviewed Carnegie in 1908, and Carnegie died in 1919, well before its publication. Again, this is Don Green talking, and he says, this was not the first time Hill used imaginary meetings to convey what he was writing about. In Think and Grow Rich, Hill, writing about the Sixth Sense, wrote about his imaginary council meeting with the 9 men whose life works had been the most impressive to Hill. These 9 imaginary council members were Emerson, Paine, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Burbank, Napoleon, Ford, and Carnegie. Hill wrote in Think and Grow Rich that during his meetings with his invisible counselors, he found his mind most receptive to ideas, thoughts, and knowledge that reached him during these times when his sixth sense was activated. Outwitting the Devil was by no means his first time to write about religion. In fact, after he published Law of Success in 1928, he received letters of criticism about his stance on schools and religion. In Think and Grow Rich, in the chapter titled The 6 Ghosts of Fear, Hill wrote that fear of death, in the majority of cases, could be charged to religious fanaticism. Hill had much to say about religious leaders in this section of his classic bestseller. Hill had much to say about religion even in his Hill's Golden Rule magazine. He wrote an article, A Suggestion to Ministers of the Gospel, in which he admonished church leaders to teach their followers to practice harmony among each other. Back to Sharon Lecter. So the choice is yours. Did Hill actually talk to the devil, or is this a parable created to teach and touch your heart? Hill's unique style will pull you in and move you in ways you never thought possible. The words in this book are Hill's own. Since the original manuscript was quite lengthy, I edited with careful precision to preserve the profound impact of his message. I have kept his original language in place even when modern grammar may have dictated adjustments. In an effort to highlight certain issues, bring clarity to his words, and show how his predictions have become realities, I have added my thoughts throughout the manuscript in a different type style. This allows you to choose to read the book either with my comments or without. Please enjoy this powerful book and share it with your friends and family. The power in Hill's words can and will change your life. All right, I tell you what, this is so good. Just to kind of bring this home, the first quote on the cover says, "Fear is the tool of a man-made devil. Self-confident faith in oneself is both the man-made weapon which defeats this devil and the man-made tool which builds a triumphant life. And it is more than that. It is a link to the irresistible forces of the universe which stand behind a man who does not believe in failure and defeat as being anything but temporary experiences." Napoleon Hill. All right, let's dive in. I'm so excited. We're going to go straight to page 41. This quote, I'll just read it real quick. It says, "For one thing, I've learned that those who meet with difficulties which seem insurmountable may, if they will do so, best overcome these difficulties by forgetting them for a time and helping others who have greater problems." This is one of those quotes where, again, we'll get into this is even before the conversation with the devil actually starts. I wrote, if it seems insurmountable, look for an opportunity to help someone with greater problems. Simple. Okay, real quick, I'm going to share this one. I didn't even have this one marked, but Sharon Lecter writes as an annotation, she writes, "May we all make an inventory of our blessings in life and give thanks for every gift that we have been given. I know that when I am at a low point in my life, I force myself to think of my family and friends and the blessings they have brought to my life. It is the quickest path up and puts my temporary setbacks into perspective." So this is one of those resilience builders, one of those things that, I mean, she's writing it in here. It's whenever you're feeling low or frustrated, this is where you focus on, one thing that I like to do is gratitudes cubed, where you take 30 seconds and write 3 things. You do that 3 times in a row, so 90 seconds, or you do it for 30 seconds, take a 10-second break, dive back in. But this is similar. And I love the way that she says, it is the quickest path up and puts my temporary setbacks into perspective. All right, let's keep going. Gotta stay focused, David. So we'll go to, Drifting with the Devil. So we're in chapter 4, page 72. Okay, so to set the scene, I think I really do have to read a good portion of this. And so Napoleon Hill, the way the book looks, there's like a Q&A. So Napoleon Hill will say a question, or he'll be Q, and then the devil is A. You may hear at the very beginning of the book, part of the conversation is like the devil is saying, you have to call me, you have to refer to me with some respect. And so you'll hear in a couple of the ways that Napoleon addresses the devil, at times he'll say His Majesty, or whatever the case may be. It's somewhat, I'm reading it somewhat sarcastically, but also like, all right, he's having this conversation, and that was their agreement that there would be some respect on the devil's name so that the devil could give Napoleon Hill all the secrets. So Napoleon says, "Tell me first about your most clever trick, the one you use to ensnare the greatest number of people." The devil says, "If you force me to give away the secret, it will mean my loss of millions of people now living and still greater numbers of millions as yet unborn. I beg of you, permit me to pass this one question unanswered." Napoleon then says, "So His Majesty the devil fears a mere humble earthbound creature? Is that right?" And the devil's response, "It is not right, but it is true. You have no right to rob me of my most necessary tool of trade. For millions of years, I have dominated earthbound creatures through fear and ignorance. Now you come along and would destroy my use of these weapons by forcing me to tell how I use them. Do you not realize that you will break my grip on every person who heeds this confession you are forcing from me? Have you no mercy? Have you no sense of humor? Have you no sportsmanship?" Napoleon then says, I'm just going to read this part straight and then we'll talk. "Stop stalling and start confessing. Who are you to ask mercy of one whom you would destroy if you could? Who are you to talk of sportsmanship and a sense of humor? You, who by your own confession have set up a living hell on earth, where you punish innocent people through their fears and ignorance. As for minding my own business, that is just what I am doing when I force you to tell how you control people through their own minds." And this is the part that I underlined. "My business, if it can be called a business, is helping to unlock the doors of the self-made prisons in which men and women are confined because of the fears you have planted in their minds." I love this because it aligns with, if you saw the first episode, then you heard me say, like, if I could do anything in the world and money wasn't a concern and I knew I wouldn't fail, what would I do? And it was, I would help people gain an accurate self-perception and employ their gifts for the good of others and for the glory of God. And when I talk about accurate self-perception, it's this idea of, and that's why I love the way that Napoleon wrote this. He said, "My business is helping to unlock the doors of the self-made prisons in which men and women are confined because of the fears you have planted in their minds." And I just wrote mine too, starting with my own mind, right? Because I want to also make sure that I have an accurate self-perception. I want to also make sure that I'm not in a self-made prison, because of fears that I may have, or that of fears that the devil's planted in my mind. So I love this. All right. And then just to drive things home, Sharon Lecter then says, "Mr. Earthbound," referring to Napoleon, "has the power to force the devil to answer his questions. His own knowledge of independent thought and lack of fear are his weapons to force this confession." So good. All right. So Napoleon Hill then goes on, and this goes to page 73, which is also there on my list. The devil says, "My greatest weapon over human beings consists of 2 secret principles by which I gain control of their minds. I will speak first of the principle of habit, through which I silently enter the minds of people. By operating through this principle, I establish, I wish I could avoid using this word, the habit of drifting. When a person begins to drift on any subject, he is headed straight toward the gates of what you earthbound call hell." So the principle of habit and the habit of drifting. So like the principle of habit is a principle, and then this habit of drifting. I think this is a powerful place to pause real quick, and there's more on this page. This idea of, this was written in 1938. This is what's so fascinating. Yeah, neuroscience and psychology and all these other things have caught up and are articulating some of these things of, the principle of habit, this idea of, you could say the flywheel effect, right? That's a principle that says as you build a habit, what you consistently do, it may start slow, but if you consistently apply force to something, then it'll gain momentum. And this is by Jim Collins. This is one of my favorite thinkers and researchers. Or there's the principle or the book, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, which is similar, right? Or the compounding effect in finance. So it's a principle, but the devil also says, I established the habit of drifting. And so Napoleon Hill then goes on to say, describe all the ways in which you induce people to drift. Define the word and tell us exactly what you mean by it. The devil says, I can best define the word drift by saying that people who think for themselves never drift, while those who do little or no thinking for themselves are drifters. A drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his own mind. He would rather let me occupy his mind and do his thinking than go to the trouble of thinking for himself. A drifter is one who accepts whatever life throws in his way without making a protest or putting up a fight. He doesn't know what he wants from life and spends all of his time getting just that. A drifter has lots of opinions, but they are not his own. Most of them are supplied by me. A drifter is one who is too lazy mentally to use his own brain. That is the reason I can take control of people's thinking and plant my own ideas in their minds. So I want to hit on this because this was a point that I appreciated, is this idea of planting. So Napoleon previously said, my business is helping to unlock the doors of the self-made prisons in which men and women are confined because of the fears you have planted in their minds. Planted, right? And then the devil says, that is the reason I can take control of people's thinking and plant my own ideas in their minds. So I wrote, how do you water and weed daily to ensure the devil's thoughts aren't growing in your mind? And I was writing this because in my book, which is right over my shoulder, Enduring Urgency, I wrote about this idea of a garden, and the idea that we've each been given a garden with seeds and with plants in seed form, and its opportunity and our responsibility to steward those, to water, weed, ensure proper sunlight, fertilize. And so in knowing that we have a garden and we have gifts, ideas, opportunities that we've been blessed with, what does it mean to guard, essentially to guard against the devil, to ensure the devil's thoughts aren't growing as weeds in our mind and aren't choking out the seeds, the gifts that we've been given? And as I think about this again, thinking about it from a leader fitness perspective, part of leader fitness is emotional intelligence. Part of emotional intelligence is is self-awareness. And so self-awareness and self-management. And so as we're thinking about why this piece, it's like, well, if I know that I'm susceptible to something, then I can guard against it. And at the end, towards the end of this episode, we're going to dive into some very practical ways, and I'll share some of the things that I've identified as areas that I'm susceptible and what I've come to some ways to guard against that. But that's why this section is self-awareness and understanding literally the tricks of the enemy. All right. So Sharon goes on to just reinforce that. She quotes Napoleon, those who do little or no thinking for themselves are drifters. A drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his own mind. Okay, this was not on the list, but I'm going to do it anyway. Napoleon says, tell me the most common habits by which you control the minds of people. The devil responds, that is one of my cleverest tricks. I enter the minds of people through thoughts which they believe to be their own. Those most useful to me are fear, superstition, avarice, greed, lust, revenge, anger, vanity, and plain laziness. Through one or more of these, I can enter any mind at any age. But I get my best results when I take charge of a mind while it is young, before its owner has learned how to close any of these 9 doors. Then I can set up habits which keep these doors ajar forever. And I'll just tell you what, I wrote down, how do you close each of these doors? Because I tell you what, he names a ton of fear, superstition, avarice, greed, lust, revenge, anger, vanity, and plain laziness. All right, so I'm going to read Sharon Lecter's annotation first before I dive into this piece. So as I said, I think I said it, the Napoleon Hill in this book talks about religious leaders. He talks about the education system, and he talks about parents. But I want to give this context because I think this is powerful. The author knew this opinion would be one of the most controversial aspects of his book. In fact, his wife was so concerned about how it would be received, that she made him promise that he would not publish it. In fact, it is only now, well after her death, that the family has agreed to share it with the world. I would encourage you to follow Hill's argument about the public education system and religious teachers, and then decide for yourself. Okay, one of the things that the devil says, and I love that she annotated this. She annotated about it. The devil says, as I said before, I start people drifting during their youth. I induce them to drift through school without knowing what occupation they wish to follow in life. Here I catch the majority of people. Habits are related. Drift in one direction and soon you will be drifting in all directions. directions. I also use environmental habits to give me a definite grip on my victims. I induce them to drift through school without knowing what occupation they wish to follow in life. This was written in 1938. I'm having conversations today with people at various stages, whether it's high school, college, post-college, and like this idea of drifting is so powerful. Let me stay focused. I see. You make it your business. So this is Napoleon. You make it your business to train children in the habit of drifting by inducing them to go through school without aim or purpose. Now tell me some of your other tricks with which you cause people to become drifters. The devil says, well, my second best trick in developing the habit of drifting is one that I put into operation with the aid of parents and public school teachers and religious instructors. I warn you not to force me to mention this trick. Do not disclose this trick. If you do so, you will be hated by my coworkers who helped me use this trick. If you publish this confession in book form, your book will be barred from public schools. It will be blacklisted by most of the religious leaders. It will be hidden from children by many parents. The newspapers will not dare give reviews of your book. Millions of people will hate you for writing the book. In fact, no one will like you or your book except those who think, and you know how very few there are of this sort. My advice to you is to let me skip the description of my second best trick. And then this is where Sharon Lecter writes what she wrote about the author knew this opinion would be one of the most controversial aspects of his book. The fact that like this is what is so mind-blowing about this book is that, as I'll share later, and maybe I'll go to it now. Let's see. Yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to skip ahead because I think it all ties together and it's really important. So at the beginning, when Sharon Lecter is writing, she writes in the note, she said, essentially asking like, well, did he have an actual conversation with the devil, or is this all just like part of this? Is this essentially just a way to write to make the content more accessible? Like this piece is powerful. This piece that I'm about to read is so fascinating. So on page 95, and again, there's so much more that we're going to dive into, but I think this is worth sharing now. Napoleon asks, why do you not try to stop me from publishing this confession I am wringing from you? The devil responds, because that would be the surest of all ways to guarantee you will publish it. I have a better plan than trying to suppress publication of my confession. I will urge you to go ahead with the publication, then sit back and watch you suffer when some of my faithful drifters begin to make things hot for you. I will not need to deny your story. My followers will do that for me. See if they don't. Sharon Lecter then goes on to annotate, knowing that indeed this book was not published for more than 70 years after Hill wrote these words, I am intrigued and anxious to learn what else he will reveal. There are plenty of fireworks still ahead. The book was literally delayed by 70 years from the time that he wrote it. And he included this part in the book. Like he asked the devil, why do you not try to stop me from publishing this confession? This is one of those sections where I tend to lean towards the side of this was a download. Like this is a download for real. Because in the moment, he couldn't have known that the book would be delayed from publication for 70 plus years. And so he prepares this manuscript, and then I imagine at some point or during the process, he shares it with his family, shares it with his wife, and there's this decision that's made that it not be released, not be published until after her death, and then that gets extended. Every time I read this section, this part just blows my mind that he wrote in the book a portion of like the devil responding, if I tried to stop you from publishing it, that would guarantee that you'll publish it. I have a better plan than trying to suppress publication of my confession. I will urge you to go ahead with the publication, then sit back and watch you suffer when some of my faithful drifters begin to make things hot for you. I will not need to deny your story. My followers will do that for me. See if they don't. So powerful. Again, this is the author of Think and Grow Rich, one of the most sought after books, one of the most talked about books in the world. And he has this other book that gets delayed in its release for 70 years. And I can't help but think what would have happened, how many people could have been impacted, how many drifters could have been saved if the information had been released. And on the other side of that, would Think and Grow Rich be as well respected of a book as it is if Hill had released this book soon after? Or would his reputation and his life and his work have been suppressed and like pushed down, discredited because of this book? At this point, his reputation is locked in with Think and Grow Rich. 70, at this point, 80 years later. What a powerful book. All right, let's keep going. Let me stay focused. I hope y'all are enjoying this as much as I am. This book is so fascinating. All right, I'll tell you what, I get it. Because even in making this video, there's a part of me that's like, was he wise to wait 70 years? Like, wait after his death to release some of this stuff? The alternative is hard to know, right? Like, you could think through it, but anyway, let's keep going. Napoleon says, never mind about me. Tell me all about this second best trick of yours with which you induce people to drift with you to hell. Devil says, my second best trick is not second at all. It is first. It is first because without it, I could never gain control of the minds of the youth. Parents, school teachers, religious instructors, and many other adults unknowingly serve my purpose by helping me to destroy in children the habit of thinking for themselves. They go about their work in various ways, never suspecting what they are doing to the minds of children or the real cause of the children's mistakes. By helping me to destroy in children the habit of thinking for themselves. This is going to be a common theme. So this is when he starts essentially speaking to this, like the public school system and towards religious leaders. And I'm going to skip around here a little bit, but I do want to say this piece before going fully into this. So Napoleon says, it seems that you go out of your way to keep people from thinking. The devil responds, yes, accurate thought is death to me. I cannot exist in the minds of those who think accurately. I do not mind people thinking as long as they think in terms of fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. Fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. Fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. He's writing this in 1938. And when I think about this, I'm like, goodness, you see that often. You don't have to go far. In fact, people sell fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. The devil goes on to say, when they begin to think in constructive terms of faith, courage, hope, and definiteness of purpose, there you go, they immediately become allies of my opposition and are therefore lost to me. When the devil says my opposition, he's referring to God. All right, so this is a section that I want to preface with, I had some amazing teachers, and this section is in my mind, is not an attack on teachers. This is more a statement on our public education system, and we'll dive into it. All right, so Napoleon says, I'm beginning to understand how you gain control of the minds of children through the help of their parents and religious instructors, but I do not see how school teachers help you in this damnable work. So the devil responds, school teachers help me gain control of the minds of children, not so much by what they teach the children as because of what they do not teach them. The entire public school system is so administered that it helps my cause by teaching children almost everything except how to use their own minds and think independently. I live in fear that someday some courageous person will reverse the present system of school teaching, and deal my cause a death blow by allowing the students to become the instructors, using those who now serve as teachers only as guides to help the children establish ways and means of developing their own minds from within. When that time comes, the school teachers will no longer belong to my staff. He said, the devil says, the entire public school system. So this is 1938. So context is 1938, the public education system in the US had only been established for a couple decades. And he says the public education school system is so administered that it helps my cause by teaching children almost everything except how to use their own minds and think independently. I got to go to my notes here because I think there's power in this. So John D. Rockefeller is quoted as, so John D. Rockefeller helped funded the General Education Board in the early 1900s, and he was quoted as saying, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of doers. So there's been a lot of research done on the American public education system, and this is in no way a shot against teachers. I believe they're doing the best they can, and like I said, I've had some amazing teachers that have done some amazing work within the system that they're in. I also recently had a conversation with a teacher, a public educator who's been in public education for 30 plus years, 30, 40 years, and she was sharing with me, I will say exactly what she shared with me, and it was what I'm about to read from Sharon Lecter. Like almost word for word. It's really fascinating because we had this conversation after I'd read this book. And so I shared this perspective with her, and she went on to say, or she went on to kind of just affirm this perspective. And Sharon says, here's the essence of Hill's critique of public education written in 1938. Do you agree with him? Think of young children during kindergarten and first grade. They are enthusiastic and volunteer for everything, raising their hands and excited to learn. Now fast forward 10 years and think about those same children as high school students. The ones sitting in the back of the class, never making eye contact with adults, and absolutely never volunteering or asking a question. They have disengaged from the learning process. What happened to these children? 10 years of schooling. They perceive that to make an error will subject them to ridicule and scorn. So they cease to participate in order to protect themselves. They are taught that solutions to all problems and conflicts lie not in their own hands and minds, but in the hands and mind of the teacher, the representative of the authorities. To act independently in the face of conflict brings swift rebuke and reprisal from the teacher. The children are thus encouraged from independent thought and indoctrinated with the concept that they are incapable of resolving their own problems. While there are many excellent teachers, Hill's critique seems validated by the state of education today. If you agree with Hill, what do you think we can do about it? One thing we should do is to seek out those teachers and schools who encourage independent thought in their students and applaud them for their courage. All right, so this is probably one of the longest pieces of annotation that Sharon did in this book, and it came at the right time. My conversation with this educator was simply because I asked her directly. I was like, when do you think children lose that interest, or when do you think children, because we were talking about the genius that's inside of everybody. I believe everybody's born with gifts, ideas, opportunities, abilities, and as they go through life, if they're blessed, some of them are able to identify them. Some of those gifts come out because of circumstances. But we were talking about genius, the kids. There's been research that backs us up. But I was asking her around when do kids lose that genius, lose that sparkle? And she said second, third grade is when they lose it. And that's exactly what Sharon Lecter is saying in this book. She says, she's essentially saying, think of young children during kindergarten and first grade. They're enthusiastic and volunteer, raising their hands and excited to learn. Now fast forward 10 years and think about those same children as high school students. And I can't help but think about some of the other schools like Avenues, the World School, or Montessori's that just have a different method of teaching that actually produces thinkers, that actually produces contributors, contributing members of society. Whew, there's a lot here. Napoleon asked this question, or he says, I'm beginning to understand how you gain control of the minds of children through the help of their parents and religious instructors, but I do not see how the school teachers help you in this damnable work. The devil's response is, school teachers help me gain control of the minds of children, not so much by what they teach the children as because of what they do not teach them. The entire public school system is so administered that it helps my cause by teaching children almost everything except how to use their own minds and think differently. I live in fear that someday some courageous person will reverse the present system of school teaching and deal my cause a death blow by allowing the students to become the instructors, using those who now serve as teachers only as guides to help the children establish ways and means of developing their own minds from within. When that time comes, the school teachers will no longer belong to my staff. I think this is an important piece to talk about because when we think about a system, it's helpful to understand how something was designed. And again, this is coming from the place of leaders. So leader fitness, your mindset, your emotional intelligence, your decision making, your communication. So how do you make decisions? How do you as a leader make decisions that are in the best interest of the people that you're serving? And it's helpful to understand, again, to not lean into emotions, but understand very practically what was the intent of a designer of a system for that system. What outcomes are you trying to achieve? My background's in civil engineering. The idea behind civil engineering is you never think about it. When you enter a building, when you enter your home, when you walk on the street, the sign of good engineering, good civil engineering, is that you don't notice it. You don't walk into a building questioning whether or not the roof is going to fall in. Ideally, you wouldn't drive down the street thinking about, ooh, a pothole. Oh no. Ideally, if the pavement engineer and the pavement team does their job, then you're not thinking about potholes. It's a whole nother subject. What I'm really getting at is John D. Rockefeller is the one. So he funded the General Education Board in the early 1900s. And one of the things that he is quoted as saying is, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of doers. Now, context is key. At this time, industry was the big thing. It was factories. And so that's what was really needed, was factory workers who didn't have to think much. And this is no shade. It was do this job, execute this task. And so the American public education system is then designed to reflect that, or designed to produce people who are ready for factory work. Fast forward 80 years from the time that this is written, or over 100 years from the time that the public education system as it's known today was brought into existence. And the system is still designed the same way, which means that we'll be producing the same kinds of people. What do I mean by that? I mean, our public education system isn't designed to create thoughtful, productive, conscious members of society. I went to public school. I had great teachers, and some of those great teachers were what saved me from the system itself. But the system is not necessarily designed to generate conscious, contributing members of society. As AI becomes more widely integrated with our world, and even more of those entry-level jobs are replaced, I would think that it's important to redesign or reshape the education system in order to produce the types of people that we want it to produce. So there are other school systems. So Montessori is another type of school system. It's a method of education that is based on self-directed activity, hands-on learning, and collaborative play. Avenues the World School is another brand of schools, and they have a similar approach. I think this struck a chord for me because this book, which was written in 1938, The Devil Says Accurate Thought is the Death of Me. This idea of thinking. And this book is also highlighting, Napoleon highlights that the public school system teaches children almost everything except how to use their own minds and think independently. Or this idea in this book struck a chord with me because one of my favorite quotes, or I'll say the first time I saw this quote, I saw it written this way, and I'll share it. It says, if your plan is for 1 year, plant rice. If your plan is for 10 years, plant trees. If your plan is for 100 years, educate children. Now, I've seen this quote attributed to Confucius and others. In doing research, I came across what is said to be the original quote. The original quote is attributed to Guangzong and is translated as, the best investment for 1 year is to grow grains. The best investment for 10 years is to grow trees. The best investment for a lifetime is to educate people. What you gain from 1 year's growth will be grains. What you gain from 10 years growth will be trees. What you gain from 100 years growth will be people. Why is this important to me? Because it's been 80 years now since this book was originally written. It wasn't released until 13 years ago, which means that there is a whole generation of people that this book missed impacting. Why specifically am I caught up on the education piece? It's because of this quote. I like both the original and the modified. If your plan is for 100 years, educate children. The system that the public education system as it's currently designed does not prepare, in my opinion, does not prepare our children to be conscious, contributing members of society. Our public education system is still designed to create factory workers. The system is not broken. It's designed well. It's well designed, and it's producing what it's been producing for the past 100 years. Factory workers. Let me just say it that way. People who are compliant, who don't question the status quo, who continue to just go along with the way things have been, which it makes sense why somebody who has a bunch of factories or who needs a bunch of workers would want a system that creates workers. More and more in the day and age that we live in today, we need more than just people who are compliant. We need more than just people who are able to follow instruction. We need people who are conscious. We need people who are willing to question the status quo, not as a means per se of tearing it down, but as a means of, well, why do we do it this way? And the answer not always being, well, that's because that's how we've always done it. I'm spending time in this one because this is leadership. Like, leadership isn't just about business or nonprofit work or government work. Leadership starts in our families. I'm not married yet, and I do not yet have children, but this book has given me things to think about as I move forward. It's easier to educate properly than it is to have to go back, unlearn, and relearn. And so many people, I'll say it, so many people in my generation are in the process of unlearning and relearning, if they've gone on that journey at all. And so if we design a better system, then that is designed to create conscious, capable, contributing members of society, then we can expect the outcome to be conscious, capable, contributing members of society. Okay, I'm gonna move on. This is why I wanted a podcast, because sometimes leadership is needed everywhere. And again, this is not against teachers. I had some amazing teachers. What this is about is they were amazing within a system that was not setting them up for success. All right, let's get back to this book. So how would you stop you? If you knew the gifts, the ideas, the opportunities, the abilities that you had, and you were trying to stop you, what would you do? Well, if I was to stop me, I would try to stop me as early as possible. I would try to put as many blocks or as many experiences or as much education or miseducation in my head so that I would have to spend a lot of time unlearning and relearning and less time actually executing. That's why, because there are other schools, whether it's private or your Montessori's or your Avenues, the World School, like there are schools that don't look like the public schools of the 1900s, like 1910, 1920, 1930. And there are many schools in this country that still look the exact exact same way. A guy with a guy by the name of Prince EA, like he made a video where he shows very clearly how phones, planes, cars have all progressed as technology has been invented, but the classrooms from the early 1900s still look like many of the classrooms today. That's wild. And again, when we're talking about how would you stop you? How would I stop an entire generation of being conscious, of being capable, of being contributing members of society? How would I ensure that they were just cogs in a machine? I would stop them when they were young, before they had a chance to think about, like to actually develop their thinking capabilities. And that's what Napoleon Hill is articulating in this book. And that's why I find it so fascinating. And that's why I also find it frustrating, because it's clear that it's not an accident. And yet when we see young kids start school, super wide-eyed, super excited to go to school, and by middle school, high school, they look drained. There is a quote, and it says, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking that it's inadequate. There are so many gifts and geniuses in our society, in our world, but if we're only measuring them based on their ability to turn in assignments on time and like answering a multiple choice test, we're missing out on the genius and on the gifts that are in our society in a major way. The devil says, page 84, nothing can stop me except the power of accurate thought. People who think accurately do not drift on any subject. They recognize the power of their own minds. Moreover, they take over that power and yield it to no person or influence. Fact of the matter is, there's a lot of money to be made in distractions, in influencing people, and this idea of drifting. I'll say it this way. There's a lot of money to be made with drifters. There is, and I get it. And this is written in 1938. It's even more clear now. Okay. Sharon annotates, says the devil, I cause people to allow me to do their thinking for them because they are too lazy and too indifferent to think for themselves. She writes, laziness plus indifference equals procrastination equals drifting. She then says, this describes a true drifter as defined by Hill. Since I have been a true procrastinator for most of my life, this hits a little too close to home for me. I like to use the excuse that I work best under pressure, but that is all it is, an excuse for why I procrastinate. Can you think of examples in your own life when laziness and indifference led you off your path to success? When an opportunity slipped through your fingers because you were too slow to seize it in time? Short response. Yes. This piece right here, this is so important because Sharon's exhibiting self-awareness. She's stating, yeah, this hits close, like even writing it. She's annotating the book and she's articulating that she likes to use the excuse of I work best under pressure. I've used that before. But she says that's all it is, an excuse for why I procrastinate. And so I think these questions that she asks, like this one, can you think of examples in your own life when laziness and indifference led you off your path to success? In recording this episode, there was so much. It was, I can put this one off. I will also articulate that I think there's a lot in this book that even to tackle this in a podcast episode, there's a weight to it. And so there's some additional insight. I love this. There's some additional insight that is given. So Napoleon asks, is man the only creature who drifts? The devil answers, yes. All other creatures move in response to definite laws of nature. Man alone defies nature's laws and drifts when he wills. Everything outside the minds of men is controlled by my opposition, by laws so definite that drifting is impossible. I control the minds of men solely because of their habit of drifting, which is only another way of saying that I control the minds of men only because they neglect or refuse to control and use their own minds. What I wrote underneath here was, God has given us dominion over everything, but if we choose to abdicate leading ourselves, the devil will gladly step in. If we choose to abdicate command of our lives, if we choose to abdicate dominion leading ourselves, the devil will gladly step in. That's exactly what's being articulated. Okay, this is where we're gonna get into some additional meat. Try to stay focused, y'all. I'm telling you, but there's so much. I highly recommend you read this book for yourself because there's so much that I can spend 3 hours unpacking this entire book, and maybe one day I will, but I'm trying to keep this one relatively. Here we go. So Napoleon asks, who are some of the present day non-drifters over whom you have no control? The devil says, I have control over no non-drifter, present or past. I control the weak, not those who think for themselves. Napoleon says, go ahead and describe a typical drifter. Give your description point by point so I can recognize a drifter when I see him. Maybe some of these make you think of yourself. Maybe some of these make you think of other people. I'm just going to ask you as I read these, listen with an open mind. Again, this is the Leader Fitness Podcast. So part of me articulating these are a way for you to gain self-awareness, a way for me to gain self-awareness. As we go through this list, it's important to listen to see which ones bring up some emotion, which ones feel like they're hitting a little close to home, because those are the ones that will help you see, okay, am I drifting in an area? Do I have a couple of these characteristics? Am I, oh my gosh, all of these are hitting? Or, okay, very few of these, if any of them hit at all. So cool, but I need to be on guard because these are the characteristics. So here we go. Napoleon says, go ahead and describe a typical drifter. Give your description point by point so I can recognize a drifter when I see him. The devil says, the first thing you will notice about a drifter is his total lack of a major purpose in life. He will be conspicuous by his lack of self-confidence. He will never accomplish anything requiring thought and effort. He spends all he earns and more too, if he can get credit. He will be sick or ailing from some real or imaginary cause and calling to high heaven if he suffers the least physical pain. He will have little or no imagination. Again, I didn't say this at the top, but as I'm reading these, if it helps, use the pronoun that works best for you. This is, again, Napoleon Hill, written in 1938. So just want to say that as well. It says he or his throughout this, but use your pronoun listen to this as if I'm saying it in your pronoun, if that's helpful. So I'm going to start again because they're that good. He will be conspicuous by his lack of self-confidence. He will never accomplish anything requiring thought and effort. He spends all he earns and more too if he can get credit. He will be sick or ailing from some real or imaginary cause and calling to high heaven if he suffers the least physical pain. He will have little or no imagination. He will lack enthusiasm and initiative to begin anything he is not forced to undertake, and he will plainly express his weakness by taking the line of least resistance whenever he can do so. He will be ill-tempered and lacking in control over his emotions. Emotional intelligence, leader fitness. If you focus on building your leader fitness, it will guard against you drifting. Let's dive back in. His personality will be without magnetism and it will not attract other people. He will have opinions on everything but accurate knowledge of nothing. He may be a jack of all trades but good at none. He will neglect to cooperate with those around him, even those on whom he must depend for food and shelter. He will make the same mistake over and over again, never profiting by failure. He will be narrow-minded and intolerant on all subjects, ready to crucify those who may disagree with him. He will expect everything of others but be willing to give little or nothing in return. He may begin many things, but he will complete nothing. He will be loud in his condemnation of his government, but he will never tell you definitively how it can be improved. He will never reach decisions on anything if he can avoid it. And if he is forced to decide, he will reverse himself at the first opportunity. Decision making. Yeah, that one hit a little bit. Decision making, right? Leader fitness is mindset, emotional intelligence, decision making, communication. It says he will never reach decisions on anything if he can avoid it. And if he is forced to decide, he will reverse himself at the first opportunity. Again, as you build your decision-making muscle, you're less likely to be a drifter. He will eat too much and exercise too little. He will take a drink of liquor if someone else will pay for it. He will gamble if he can do it on the cuff. He will criticize others who are succeeding in their chosen calling. This one, be mindful of it. If you're scrolling or you see somebody, be mindful, even if you don't articulate the criticism, be mindful, and I'm speaking to myself as much as to you, be mindful of who you're criticizing and why you're criticizing them. This says the drifter will criticize others who are succeeding in their chosen calling. In brief, the drifter will work harder to get out of thinking than most others work in earning a good living. He will tell a lie rather than admit his ignorance on any subject. If he works for others, he will criticize them to their backs and flatter them to their faces. So that's the list that the devil gives, right, of a drifter. Feel free to rewind that and replay it and see what, again, share and see, comment, share which one of these hits. Like which ones of these are ones that make you say, ouch, okay, that one resonated a little bit deeper. You don't have to share it, but that's part of what this is. That's part of the introspective work that we're doing. And when we're able to articulate it, it has less power over us because we can grow together. We can grow in community and we can hold each other accountable to become the best version of ourselves and the leader our team needs, right? So go back, replay this because it's helpful to understand the characteristics of a drifter so that, as Napoleon says, so that you can recognize a drifter when you see them. All right, now we've described what a drifter looks like. I'll just continue going with this. So Napoleon says, you have given me a graphic description of the drifter. Please now describe the non-drifter so that I may recognize him on sight. The devil says, the first sign of a non-drifter is this. this. He is always engaged in doing something definite through some well-organized plan, which is definite. He has a major goal in life toward which he is always working, and many minor goals, all of which lead toward his central scheme. There's so much goodness there. Major goal, large focus area, many minor goals, and then the vision, the overarching vision that is guiding the major and minor goals. So good. The tone of his voice, the quickness of his step, the sparkle in his eyes, the quickness of his decisions clearly mark him as a person who knows exactly what he wants and is determined to get it no matter how long it may take or what price he must pay. I wrote, knowing where you're going makes many decisions easier. If you ask him questions, he gives you direct answers and never falls back on evasions or resorts to subterfuge. He extends many favors to others, but accepts favors sparingly or not at all. He will be found up front whether he is playing a game or fighting a war. If he does not know the answers, he will say so frankly. He has a good memory, never offers an alibi for his shortcomings. He never blames others for his mistakes, no matter if they deserve the blame. He used to be known as a go-getter, but in modern times, he is called a go-giver. You will find him running the biggest business in town, living on the best street, driving the best automobile, and making his presence felt wherever he happens to be. He is an inspiration to all who come into contact with his mind. He is an inspiration to all who come into contact with his mind. The major distinguishing feature of the non-drifter is this: he has a mind of his own and uses it for all purposes. Sharon Lecter goes on to say, the non-drifter, in quotations, has a mind of his own and uses it for all purposes. She goes on to ask, can you think of someone you know who fits this description? Is that person a non-drifter? This is one of the central concepts in this book, this idea of drifting, being a drifter versus being a non-drifter. And you just heard the articulation of the characteristics of a drifter and the characteristics of a non-drifter. And when you build your leader fitness leads you to be a non-drifter. Building up your mindset, your resilience, your ability to recover quickly from setbacks and challenges. Building your emotional intelligence, your self-awareness, your self-management, your social awareness, and your relationship management. Building those skills, and they are skills that can be developed, increase your leader fitness, and ensure that you're a non-drifter. When you build up your decision-making abilities, decision-making goes into vision. Decision-making goes into goal setting. Decision-making goes into how you communicate with people. It says, for a non-drifter, the quickness of his decisions clearly mark him as a person who knows exactly what he wants and is determined to get it no matter how long it may take or what price he must pay. Decision-making, which is one of the 4 components of leader fitness, that's what Napoleon Hill is articulating right here. The 4th one, right, communication, is the 4th component of leader fitness. And even so, it says the tone of his voice, right? Like communication, the quickness of his step, like the sparkle in his eye. This is getting after, like, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it. All of, like, everything communicates. And so it says, if he does not know the answer, he will say so frankly. It's not, oh, I have to be right at all times. No, you don't have to have all the answers as the leader. You do have to be like, and yes, it takes some vulnerability to articulate, hey, I don't know this, but that's a muscle you can build. And the idea is that you surround yourself with the best and y'all grow together. They're joining you because they see something in you. And on the other side of that, or the other piece of that, is you see something in them, so they're on your team. And so you create a space, in a healthy space. This is what we talk about, healthy space, not dysfunctional, a healthy space where there's communication, collaboration, trust, right? And when you're able to do that, then people show up as the best, or can show up as the best version of themselves. They're willing to improve and maximize the overarching impact of your team, of your organization. This is why I'm camping out in the drifting, non-drifting, because there's so much goodness in this, and it really helps drive home this point of why leader fitness, because without leader fitness, you are more susceptible to drifting. All right, we have a couple more places, and then I got to cut it off at half of the book. All right, so page 104, here we go. Napoleon says, tell me some of your other tricks with which you cause people to drift in life. Devil says, one of my most effective devices is failure. The majority of people begin to drift as soon as they meet with opposition, and not 1 out of 10,000 will keep on trying after failing 2 or 3 times. I underlined one of the most effective devices is failure, and I wrote, I will be the 1 out of 10,000. So that's just me, because I do understand it. That's part of this book behind me, Enduring Urgency, that I wrote. It's about building resilience, developing patience, and taking consistent focused action in line with the things and the people that are most important to you. And the building resilience, the reason for resilience is because we face challenges, we face setbacks. Without challenges and setbacks, resilience is less needed, right? It's become a word that's overused, and I'm glad that I did the research, did the work to understand it and learn it when I did, because now it's a buzzword, sure, but there's a reason why people have been using the word, even if they can't articulate articulate the need for resilience. But that's why you build up your resilience. Resilience is part of mindset. You build up your resilience. You build up your ability, your resilience and your adaptability, right? You build up your ability to adapt to different situations, which then merges with emotional intelligence because you get to see, you're socially aware. You get to see what your team needs in a moment. And as you see what they need, then you get to show up as the leader your team needs. And if you show up and it's not what your team needs, you have resilience, you have empathy to be aware and to be willing to hear where they're coming from and get to understand what's important to them. And then you have resilience because feedback, right? You want to create that psychologically safe space. And as you do, you as the leader also have to prepare yourself, because once you create it, then people are more likely to give you the feedback, the tough stuff that will help you grow, but that isn't always fun to hear. So I love this stuff because it's all connected. And so talking about resilience, talking about failure is so important. So Napoleon then says, so it is your business to induce people to fail whenever you can. Is that correct? The devil says, you have it right. Failure breaks down one's morale, destroys self-confidence, subdues enthusiasm, dulls imagination, and drives away definiteness of purpose. Without these qualities, no one can permanently succeed in any undertaking. The world has produced thousands of inventors with abilities superior to that of the late Thomas A. Edison, but these men have never been heard of, while the name of Edison will go marching on because Edison converted failure into a stepping stone to achievement, while the others used it as an alibi for not producing results. I'm gonna let that sit for a moment. I want to share the thought that Sharon shared. So she says, the capacity to surmount failure without being discouraged is the chief asset of every man who attains outstanding success in any calling. And I wrote next to this, I just wrote, that sounds like resilience. The capacity to surmount failure without being discouraged. That's so good. And then she goes on to say, in the book 3 Feet from Gold, my co-author and I interviewed more than 35 of today's top leaders, not about their successes, but about their toughest moments and how they persevered to achieve great success. For example, Julie Crone, the first woman ever inducted into the Thoroughbred Hall of Fame with 3,704 victories under her reigns, described her struggles at the beginning of her career as a jockey. Many of the horse owners simply would not hire a woman jockey. She said her motto of perseverance was keep showing up. And we've talked through a lot of pieces from the first half of this book. We just talked through failure and resilience from pages 104 and 105. I'm going to share from page 106. The devil says, search accurately into the lives of men and women who achieve enduring success, and you will find, without exception, that their success has been in exact proportion to the extent that they surmounted failure. Their success has been in exact proportion to the extent that they surmounted failure. The life of every successful person loudly acclaims that which every true philosopher knows. Every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success. All right. So in this final section, I really want to dial into how would you stop you? So we've looked at this book, Outwitting the Devil, and we understand that it really is learning the tools, the tactics, and the tricks of the enemy. And when I asked this question to begin with, it's really taking a reflective stance and understanding yourself. It's like, if I knew me the way I know me and my intent was to stop me, what would I do? There was this recent trend that I saw, and it made me smile when I saw it on social media, and it was people asking ChatGPT or asking AI essentially how it would keep them from living a purposeful life or becoming the best versions of themselves. And the responses were fascinating and immediately reminded me of this book, Outwitting the Devil. I've used AI to explore this, and I'll share some of the things that I learned. But I've also simply asked myself, in what areas am I susceptible to not staying on my path? In what areas am I susceptible to being knocked off my path or to not staying on my path? And I came up with 3 main areas: discouragement, distraction, disillusionment. Discouragement, allowing myself to entertain thoughts of what if this doesn't work, or what if no one listens, or what if you create enemies? Just unhelpful thoughts. Distraction, social media, what other people are doing. I like to say spending too much time peeking over the fence at my neighbor's yard, at my neighbor's garden, instead of focusing on my own. Again, this is tied to my book, Enduring Urgency, Thinking Like a Tortoise harvest and a time of hairs. And in it, we really talk, a part of it is this idea of what's in your garden, identifying the abilities, the ideas, the opportunities that you've been blessed with. And if you're watching this or listening to this, then you've been blessed with gifts. Sometimes I get distracted via social media or spending too much time wondering what other people are doing and not focused on my own path, my own garden. You can learn from other people, you can gain strategies and tips, and you can acquire gardening tools, but at the end of the day, your garden is your garden. All right, and then the third one was disillusionment. I'm gonna look it up in real time. This word, I always wanna make sure I say the right definition. And it's really a feeling of disappointment resulting from the discovery that something is not as good as one believed it to be. This is something that I know that I have to be mindful of. There is no perfect organization. There is no perfect person, short of Jesus, my opinion. My belief. My belief is that there's no perfect person who has ever walked this earth other than Jesus Christ. Stand on that. Yes. But disillusionment, this idea of, oh man, I've now gotten a peek behind the curtain. Oh, this is how it works. I'm a little disappointed in allowing myself to become focused on what isn't set up for me instead of leveraging what I have and learning and leaning into the people I know. And I know the reality is I know some pretty cool people. Sometimes if I'm not careful and mindful, I'll find myself going down, not rabbit holes, but spending too much time on what could have been, or, oh, this system isn't as great as it could be, right? Even earlier in this episode, talking about the education system, well, it's one thing to whine and complain about it, but it's like, okay, well, what are the actionable steps? I like Napoleon Hill's recommendation of putting them in positions where they're teaching a subject, they're teaching something. That way, because there is a different level of knowledge gain that you have when you're teaching something than if you're just consuming the information. So all that to say, those are three areas: discouragement, distraction, and disillusionment. Three areas that if I'm not mindful and cognizant and conscious of them can allow me to go off of my path. Now, the one thing that I wanted to say with disillusionment was sometimes I focus on what isn't set up for me instead of leveraging what I have and leaning into the people that I know. And I know some pretty cool folks, some pretty cool people, just like I said, this reminds me of one of my favorite quotes and questions that came from John Maxwell's story about how he met Coach Wooden. And so John Maxwell shares in this story that people were talking about who they knew, and John Maxwell was like, well, who do you know that I should know? And it's a question that he said he's asked many times. And there's a person that heard him ask that question and was like, well, I know Coach John Wooden. And John Maxwell was like, well, all right, I'd love to meet him. I'd love to ask him questions. And so he tells a story about in preparation to meet Coach Wooden, he has like 4 pages or many pages of notes of questions that he wants to ask. Anyway, I love the story. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and put this out there. I'll have 4 pages of questions if John Maxwell ever comes onto, or when he comes onto the Leader Fitness podcast. I'll be super juiced. You'll see a big, even thinking about it right now, there's just a big grin on my face. So yeah, who do you know that I should know that should be on this podcast? Let us know. Email us, comment, reach out to us, connect us, and let's make it happen. All right. I want to spend a little bit more time on some very practical things. So I'm going to share some of the things that I learned when I was using AI. I asked it for its perspective based on what information it has of me. I asked it and how I've been using the tool. What am I susceptible to? Give me some actions based on that susceptibility. Give me some neuroscience behind it. And so this is, and I'll share the next step that I took in a moment. So susceptibility, overconsumption of information. It says, as someone who enjoys learning, you could fall into the trap of consuming excessive information without taking actionable steps. This analysis paralysis keeps you from moving forward. Action. Limit input. Set a time cap on daily content consumption. For example, reading, videos, podcasts. Focus more on output. What action or new strategy can you implement today? So that's limit input. Output-oriented learning. For every hour of input, reading, watching videos, require at least one action or reflection from it. Make it a habit to create more than you consume. And then the third action, batch learning sessions. Instead of constant learning throughout the day, batch it into one session so you can spend more time executing. I love these. These are great actions that I can take. The neuroscience insight is constantly consuming new information stimulates the brain's dopamine system without creating satisfaction. Taking action on information learned creates dopamine fulfillment, which enhances learning and productivity. So again, if this is you, if this is resonating, there are some very clear actions that you can take, that we can take. I then asked it to add some Bible. I did. I was just like, add some Bible into this. So for overconsumption of information, the biblical principle here is Ecclesiastes 12:2. 12:2 says, of making many books there is no end, much study wearies the body. And so it goes on to say, this highlights the need for balance between learning and action. Too much information without application can lead to exhaustion and inaction. Action with scripture. Prioritize wisdom over knowledge. Proverbs 4:7 says, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. And in all you're getting, get understanding. It says, focus on wisdom that leads to practical application rather than endless learning. And then the other action it says is act on what you learn. James 1:22 says, but be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourself. Be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourself. So you can take in a lot of information, but if you're not actioning on that information, is it actually adding value, or are you just storing it? And that's part of why I'm spending time stepping through this book and sharing some of the thoughts and some of the things that I've learned, is because if I'm only consuming and I'm not creating output, creating value, then that's an imbalance. In act on what you learn, it says, apply what you learn immediately to avoid spiritual and mental stagnation. This is so good. It's like the water should be flowing through you. Your water being your gifts, your ideas, your opportunities. Like there should be action taken so that it doesn't get stagnant, so that you don't get stagnant. And so if you're just consuming, your muscles will atrophy. And so this is kind of what that's saying: stagnation, spiritual atrophy, which is real, mental atrophy if you're not using what you have. In the same way, in the physical body, we don't work out, our muscles will atrophy. Same thing with spiritual and mental. All right, let's do two more. These ones get a little bit more personal. So fear and indecision. And again, this is from ChatGPT. So susceptibility. In navigating multiple ventures, fear and indecision could surface. Whether it's fear of failure in pitching palm, fear of rejection in sales, or indecision in choosing the next step for lead comm gym. When I tell you it got personal, I was like, wow, okay. We'll save palm for another day, but that's a professional development and performance management tool that I'm working on. All right, so action. Combat fear with exposure. Take small steps into the areas you fear most. For example, make a low-stakes sales call or share your palm idea with a trusted advisor. Exposure therapy and psychology shows that repeated exposure to fear reduces its emotional grip. Decision-making frameworks. Look, I love this. Use a decision matrix or tools like 80-20 analysis to make clear, objective decisions and move forward quickly. And then the third action, set go dates. For important decisions, set deadlines. The pressure to decide can stop you from lingering in uncertainty. So good. So psychology insight here. The fear of uncertainty activates the brain's amygdala, which can hijack rational thinking. By using structured decision-making processes, you engage the prefrontal cortex, improving clarity and reducing emotional decision-making. Y'all, when we talk about leader fitness, this is the intersection, right? Your decision-making isn't just decision-making. Your decision-making is influenced by your mindset, is influenced by your emotional intelligence and your emotions. And then how you communicate is influenced by your decision-making, your emotions, your mindset. So these things work together. They're not isolated, period. They are not isolated. They interact. We're humans. All right, so fear and indecision, biblical principle. So 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds us, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. That's the Bible verse. God has not given us the spirit of fear. I've seen other versions where it's like, God has not given us the spirit of fear or timidity, but of power, love, sound mind, self-control. ChatGPT goes on to say, fear and indecision are tools of the enemy to make us ineffective, but God gives us the strength to move forward confidently. Y'all, that's a word. Fear and indecision are tools of the enemy to make us ineffective. Oh my goodness. But God gives us the strength to move forward confidently. And then action with scripture. Trust God's strength. Isaiah 41:10 says, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. Lean on this promise when fear arises. And then make decisions with faith. Psalm 37:23 says, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Take decisive action, trusting that God is guiding your steps. This is where I think the beauty of prompt engineering, I think this is where we can use technology for good, right? Like this is like getting coached by ChatGPT or getting mentored and just getting that reminder of, no. Psalm 37:23 says the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Knowing that, you can take decisive action, trusting that God is guiding your steps. This also implies that you're spending time with God to know him and then be able to build that trust that he is guiding your steps. All right. Final one, inconsistent self-discipline. Susceptibility. Balancing multiple ventures and projects may lead to inconsistencies in maintaining routines, whether in health, productivity, or your personal development. Action. Build non-negotiable habits. Identify keystone habits, such as a morning routine, prospecting for an hour daily, and make them non-negotiable regardless of other demands. All right, I got to tell on myself for a little bit. I'm in a group coaching program with Dan Martell. He's founded multiple SaaS companies and exited, and now he coaches and leads a variety of businesses. He has these 5 daily non-negotiables that as part of being in his program, you sign on to. And so I love the fact that ChatGPT said build non-negotiable habits, and it's a beautiful thing. So just wanted to name that. Gamify progress. Oh, that's why I said I was going to tell on myself, because this week I haven't been keeping up with the daily non-negotiables, so I need to get back on that. That's why I said I was going to tell on myself. I had to told on myself. We'll get back on it. All right, gamify progress. Track your progress and reward yourself for consistency, like streaks and points. So this builds anticipation and motivation. And then start small. Focus on consistently completing small, manageable actions. This reduces resistance to building the habit. The neuroscience insight is habits form through neuroplasticity. The more you perform an action, the more ingrained it becomes. Small wins trigger the brain's reward center, reinforcing the behavior and making it easier to repeat. Let me go back. Habits form through neuroplasticity. The more you perform an action, the more ingrained it becomes. That doesn't say the more you perform a positive action. It just says the more you perform an action, which means that this neuroscience insight is agnostic. If you repeatedly perform an action, whether it's positive or negative, beneficial or detrimental, habits can form. And this book, man, in 1938, he's talking about this and science catches up. Napoleon Hill writes that the devil says, "My greatest weapon over human beings consists of 2 secret principles by which I gain control of their minds. I will speak first of the principle of habit, through which I silently enter the minds of people. By operating through this principle, I establish, I wish I could avoid using this word, the habit of drifting. When a person begins to drift on any subject, he is headed straight toward the gates of what you earthbound call hell." So I just wanted to go back to this because the neuroscience is there. This book is articulating it, right? And then there's this idea of, one of my favorite words is consistency. There's 2 definitions. One is what we repeatedly do, or doing, like, consistency is essentially doing something repeatedly. And then the other definition of consistency is like the makeup, what a thing is made of. And so the idea being, I love this quote of, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." So your consistency reveals your consistency. What you repeatedly do reveals who you are and builds who you are. And who you are informs what you repeatedly do, which is why there are many books that talk about identity change being the way to change your habits, like starting with the deepest level being identity. If you can change who you see yourself as, then that will then allow you to change those habits. Okay, so that's the neuroscience insight. Biblical principle. Hebrews 12:11 acknowledges, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it." ChatGPT goes on to say, "Discipline is not easy, but it bears great fruit when consistently applied." Action with scripture. Rely on God's strength for discipline. 1 Corinthians 9:27 says, "But I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified." And so it says discipline is a spiritual practice as well as a mental one. The other action, persevere in routine. Galatians 6:9 says, "And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart." Keep pressing forward even when it's difficult, trusting that consistent discipline will yield results. All right, so you got some neuroscience, you got some Bible. Really what I'm hoping you're taking away is how important it is to know yourself, to know what you're susceptible to, and to be proactive about those weaknesses and your susceptibilities. If you believe in God, pray, spend time with him, spend time in the Bible. There is brilliance in the Bible. And then know that in today's world, many people and organizations are competing for your attention. They look for drifters, and a lot of money can be made from drifters. As leaders, it's imperative that you have a clear vision of where you want to go. Otherwise, the wind and the waves will cause you to drift. See what I did there with drifting? I was in Monterey a few weeks ago, and as I looked across the water, I saw a boat. You may call it a motor yacht. And it made me think, I wonder if there are times when we turn our engines off. Because I'll speak for myself. Drifting doesn't always happen because I'm out of gas. It doesn't always happen because I'm tired. When I'm tired, I tend to drift more. I'm more susceptible to some certain things. But that's not the only time. So tiredness is one reason why drifting happens for me. But again, this is for me. If this is for you as well, cool. Hang on. Stay with me. It may be because I'm not sure where to navigate to next. So again, I shut off my engine because I'm not sure where to go next. I'm too busy looking at another boat, right? Peeking in somebody's garden, not paying attention to my world, but looking at somebody else's world. I'm overwhelmed by the wind, the water, the surroundings. I simply don't know if I have what I need to get to the next location. Inventory check, right? Anyway, let me not go too fast. So I may not know what I need, if I have what I need to get to the next location. And then 6, sometimes it is because we're just being present in the moment. It's like, okay, let me shut off the boat. Let me just enjoy where I am in this moment. So with an awareness of things that may cause me to drift, I can identify ways to guard against drifting. If I know that I'm more susceptible to drifting when I'm tired, rest. If I know I'm more susceptible to drifting because I'm not sure where to navigate to next, then I need to ask questions and get clear next steps. If I'm too busy looking at another boat, I need to remind myself to avoid comparison. If I'm overwhelmed by the wind, the water, and the surroundings, it's important to be aware and focus on my sphere of influence. And one of the quotes that I love that is actually, again, in my book, is, I can only do what I can do, and only I can do what I can do, so I will do what I can do in excellence. And this is just saying, hey, I can only do what I can do. So I have my sphere of influence, and only I can do what I can do. So I have my sphere of influence, and I'm uniquely made. I believe that. Everybody is born with gifts. Everybody is born with ideas, opportunities, abilities. And then the last piece is a decision. So I will do what I can do with excellence. It's a decision. It's a choice. And so I can either focus on, oh man, I'm overwhelmed by the wind, the water, the surroundings, because I'm focusing on that. Or I can remind myself, oh no, God has given me, God has not, going back to the Bible verse up top, God hasn't given me a spirit of fear and timidity, but one of power, love, sound mind, to self-control. That's the way to counteract that one. Number 5, I simply don't know if I have what I need to get to the next location. Check your inventory. Like, take time to understand what's in your garden. What ideas do you have? What abilities do you have? What opportunities have you been given? And when you're able to actually sit with that, then you're more inclined to be like, oh, okay, I actually do have these things. Ooh, I do have these giftings, right? And as you sit with it, and maybe you have to ask other people, like, hey, people that are closest to you, what gifts do you see in me? There are plenty of ways to identify what's in your garden. And then 6 was, sometimes it's being present. It's because you're being present in the moment, and you're just like, okay, I just want to chill for a little bit. Being present where we are is great, but we should avoid complacent apathy. And complacency is a feeling of smug or uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievements. And so again, in my book, shameless plug, Enduring Urgency, yeah, y'all, it's fine. Until there are sponsors. This is going to be sponsored by LeadCom Gym and sponsored by Enduring Urgency. Anyway, so in this book, I talk about how I approach avoiding complacency while also remaining content. And it's a quote that I heard from Dr. Darius Daniels. He basically says, how are you stewarding where you are and what you have now? If you do what you're supposed to do in this season, and you do what you're supposed to do in the next season, and you do what you're supposed to do in the next season, you automatically and organically accomplish purpose. And for me, that's how I approach like contentment, try to mitigate complacency. And really it's about stewardship. It's about how am I stewarding what I have and where I am today. Very practical. When I go grocery shopping, I know that if I don't buy it, I won't be tempted to eat it later. But if it's in my house, I'll eat it. So my self-control actually is in the store. It's not actually about, I don't even test my self-control or lack thereof when I'm in the house. I try to preempt my lack of self-control at the house by having self-control in the store. So this whole episode is about knowing yourself, knowing what you're susceptible to, and then taking proactive steps to put things in place so that you can be the best version of yourself and the leader your team needs. Because your team does need you, your world does need you, and they need you to show up healthy, they need you to show up whole, they need you to show up ready to go. Drifting is a choice. I think drifting has been made easier with the advent of social media, entertainment at our fingertips, food at the click of a button. At any moment, we can choose to chart our course, to turn our engine on and get moving. All right, real quick. Chart our course. Proverbs 29:18 says, without vision, the people perish. Another version says, where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. There's another version that says, where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. But blessed is he who keeps the law. Part of this is about knowing where you want to go or having an idea in mind. It's not about being perfect. It's not about always getting everything right. It's about choosing where you want to go and moving in that direction. Knowing that you'll face challenges, knowing that it'll take time, and knowing that you're going to learn along the way. Again, drifting is a choice. You choose not to do the hard work, the introspection to become the best version of yourself. And there are plenty of ways to escape. There's social media, there's food, there's alcohol, there's pornography, there's a ton of stuff. There's an endless amount of things to keep you distracted, to keep you drifting, to aid you in your drifting. It does take intentionality to stop, to get out of that habit to break the habit of drifting and to become a non-drifter. What I will say is that listening to the Leader Fitness podcast, being in community with other leaders who are here to train, who are here to become the best versions of themselves and the leader their team needs, that's how you avoid drifting. It's having accountability buddies that you can call on and say, hey, I'm struggling in this area. Can you pray with me? Hey, I'm struggling in this area. Can you just check in with me on this? Hey, I'm just not having the greatest day, but I know that I know that I can turn it around. It's about having people that are willing to encourage you. All right. So if you wanted to stop you, what would you do? That's the question I want you to answer. And let me know what comes up as you're sitting with that question. We can be accountability buddies as we grow together. That's it. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for listening to the Leader Fitness podcast presented by LeadCom Gym. I'm your host, David Brown-Dawson, with a reminder: be a conscious leader who cares. Be a conscious leader who communicates authentically from a place of resilience and empathy with the spirit of stewardship. View leadership through the lens of stewardship. How are you stewarding where you are and what you have today? Don't drift through life. The world needs you and your gifts. Take care. Workout complete. Thanks for watching. For more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you want to work with me more directly via coaching or workshop, go to leadcomgym.com. I'm David Brown-Dawson, encouraging you to be a conscious leader who cares. I'll see you in the next video. Let's grow together.